Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Gloria, if you can accept for the record that everyone is here. Okay, so first item, new business, is with Kevin, it looks like, right, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. This evening, I'm actually going to turn this over to Dave Ruffner, our airport manager, to do the presentation, and then when he's finished with his presentation, we'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. We're going to be talking about commercial minimum standards for the airport. A little bit of history of why we're implementing these now, we're asking to implement these now, is it's actually directly tied to skydiving at the airport. So we did develop some commercial minimum standards for skydiving in 2021. And very shortly after that, we realized that we needed to implement commercial minimum standards for all commercial activities at the airport to make it even and fair across the board. And a little bit of history, in 2013, there was a complaint filed against the city and the airport for economic discrimination and exclusive rights at the airport, which resulted in the airport losing grant eligibility for many years. It was a long process, and we've battled it out for quite some years. But where we're at now is our grants have been reinstated, and we're working on our first federal grant now. So we did reach resolution on that, and one of the items that came about during that process was implementing commercial minimum standards for the airport. What commercial minimum standards are is it's any airport receiving federal funding needs to provide assurance that they will make the airport available for public use on a fair and reasonable scale, and will not unjustly discriminate against any kind or class of aeronautical activity or use of the airport. What commercial minimum standards will do for us is set kind of that baseline entry level standard of what we're looking for in a proposal for a commercial operator. So it's really a guide. It's not a legal binding document. It's more information based. So in the document, it goes over insurance requirements. It goes over FAA certificates necessary to do aircraft maintenance, flight instruction, our average commercial activities we see on the airport. The minimum standards are necessary to remain in compliance with grant insurance moving forward. And when implemented appropriately, we will maintain that grant eligibility with fair and reasonable standards at the airport. The guide, it provides a guide. It's a permitting process to obtain a commercial operating permit at the airport. So there's several sections of the document. Section 3 is really where it goes into what we're looking for in a commercial proposal, line by line. Similar to what happens when we put things out to bid and or an RFQ, things like that. It spells out what we need in the proposal so we can review it and accept it. Most of the sections within it, you'll see a line that says that they need to lease the amount of space necessary for the operation, and that's really on a case-by-case basis. If it's a very small flight school, for instance, they wouldn't need to rent whole lot of space, but we would consider things like restrooms or classrooms, and we want to ensure that any commercial operator does have the room and facilities to be capable of conducting their business effectively. There's also with the commercial minimum standards, we will be coming back at the next meeting, the first meeting in January, for approval of a document. And one of the items that we would like to see is staff's ability to modify and update these administratively from time to time. And it would really allow us to, on the drop of a dime, be able to develop new standards for an operation that is not listed here now. Now, when we developed these, we did go through and brainstorm, and we think we have everything in here that we would likely see at the airport in the near future, maybe even some that in the not so near future, but we went ahead and developed those standards anyways. So it's a very robust document, and it was developed very thoroughly. Again, it's a document that's just new to Casa Grande. Most airports have minimum standards in place, including all of our surrounding airports like Chandler, Marana, Eloy, and Coolidge have minimum standards in place now. We're just at the point where we should implement them before we start seeing economic activity really blowing up at the airport. And with us getting our grant eligibility back, we're hoping to see some great improvements at the airport where we can start marketing the airport for commercial operators to come in. So this will set the stage and have us ready and prepared when that happens. We also included a section in here. If allowed to update these minimum standards, we have a process of doing that. And that section is in section 2.2-2, amendments of the minimum operating standards, where it states that the airport manager may, from time to time, propose to amend these minimum operating standards. When amendments are proposed, notice of the amendment shall be posted to the city's website, in the airport terminal building, and mailed and emailed to the Casa Grande Airport commercial operators. The notice shall include a 60-day public comment period, so we want to include the public in any amendments that we have to these, after which time, the conclusion of the comment period time, the proposed amendments and all the comments made during the comment period shall be reviewed, and if deemed appropriate, the city manager will approve or deny them. The approval of the city manager shall be final. And so that will allow us to update these and add new standards for, one of the things that comes to mind is advanced air mobility. It's a kind of a hot topic in the aviation world right now. eVTOLs, electric vehicles, are coming into play. We did not develop a standard for that, and the reason why is because there are no guidance or standards at the FAA level yet. So once they develop those, we will probably need to amend this and include it into our document as well. But that's what we have for amending and changing the standards. So it's got plenty of time for public comment and review, and then of course final approval will be the city manager. The application process is section 2-3, and that goes over, in addition to section 3, it basically goes over how to apply for and the process of obtaining a commercial operating permit. Now, the commercial operating permit could be attached to a lease license or agreement with the airport. Within the document, we also are able to issue permits to non-tenants. So, for instance, you could be doing flight instruction at the airport, but not leasing a facility or have classrooms on the airport, but because you're still conducting the activity and there's a money exchange, we would still review it and approve it for a non-tenant. In that situation, we would just issue the commercial operating permit, and it wouldn't be tied to a lease license or an agreement. It just authorizes the entity to perform commercial operations at the airport. Some of the sections that it does go over is in Article 7, it goes over fixed base operators. Again, something that we don't have now, but we could have in the future, so it does set that standard. We have special aviation service operators. These are primarily what we anticipate we'll be seeing in the near future, and that's for like hangar shade leasing services, aircraft sales, aircraft maintenance and aircraft part sales, aircraft rental services, flight training, commercial skydiving, aircraft component maintenance and service sales, aircraft charter and air taxi service, crop dusting, specialized flying services, and aircraft management services. It also has the commercial operating permits for non-tenants. Those are primarily going to be like our maintenance facilities. We see a lot of mechanics that come down from the flight schools or from Chandler, and what it is they're working out of the bed of their truck. They have all their tools and equipment, and they can come down onto the airfield and repair airplanes commercially. We also have a section, Article 10, for non-commercial activities, and this one raised a few questions in the development of it, and it was something the FAA really wanted to see in here. And it goes over, so flying clubs, they're not really a commercial, they're not doing commercial business, but because it's a club that generates revenue, it did fall under the commercial standards. And then private hangars is in here as well. And the only reason that private hangars is in the document is because if a hangar tenant were to sublease their hangar it would become a commercial activity. We don't have any of that going on yet, but if somebody were to sublease their hangar, it would be revenue generating and it would be considered a commercial activity, so that's why it's listed in the commercial minimum standards. And that is just about all I had. I'm more than willing to answer any questions or provide additional feedback if Mayor and Council have any questions.
Dave, if we can, before we get into the questions, perhaps you can give the mayor and council a bit of a context of the type of commercial activities, the number and the types of commercial activities that are transpiring on the airport today. And second, if you can provide for them a bit of an overview of the process that went through as you were developing these and how it gets brought to them. I know you talked about this coming back before them in a meeting in January for their consideration, but perhaps you can outline that as well.
Yeah, of course. So currently, we have two commercial operators on the airfield. One of them is the commercial skydiving, and the other one is an aircraft maintenance facility. And so what we're going to do is utilize this document, if approved, as a guide to develop commercial operating permits for both of those. We will be working with them to ensure that this doesn't restrict or prohibit them from continuing to operate on the airport in any way. It's going to be a very seamless, painless approach when we talk to these folks. Right now, I think the major change from what we're currently doing to this document is going to be the insurance requirements. I think one of the operators has the necessary insurance and the other one doesn't, but they're also a non-tenant. So they're operating, their business is elsewhere in town, and so they don't necessarily have to have the insurance for what they're doing at the airport. So we'll get more details on that. And the development of the commercial minimum standards, we started the development with ADOT Aeronautics and the FAA. These are the two entities where we apply and receive grant monies for the airport primarily. Both of those entities have grant assurances. So anytime we accept federal grants or state grants, there are several grant assurances that we have to comply with to be eligible to receive the funds, and then we have to maintain that eligibility to prevent having to pay that money back. So it's really not a complicated process, and so long as we implement this appropriately, there won't be any issues with compliance. We developed this initially, the first draft of the commercial minimum standards, we took to the Airport Advisory Board in 2021. So it's been quite a while. We've modified it pretty heavily over the years to get it to this point. And so we took it to the board and we did a whole matrix with each board member and got their input and feedback and development of it. And when we just recently took it last month back to the Airport Advisory Board, who did approve it, made a recommendation to council to approve it. I'm not sure if those minutes are in your package yet or not, but they will be soon. But the board approved it, and so we're ready to put it into play as soon as council is, if you approve it. And Larry, was there another item? Okay.
Anyone have any questions? Oh, Matt?
Hey, thanks. Dave, I'm glad that we're here tonight. The airport's such a big economic impact on the city. It's going to continue to grow. And I like seeing in here about an FBO because I think we're getting close to that point. Have you had any interest yet from anybody that you know of? Or?
No, and that was one of the heavily discussed items throughout the development of this is some of the folks that were on kind of our committee that developed these standards were curious as to why are we developing standards when folks are not knocking on the door to come in here yet. Well, the reason why is so that we're prepared when they do.
Right.
So currently we do not have anybody interested, but again, as we start really beautifying the airport and fixing things up, and hopefully we can market the airport soon, an FBO could be something to be considered, and we could even though nobody's knocking on the door, it could go out as a procurement process, so we could put RFQ or an RFP out to see if anybody proposes. We've done that before just with leasing facilities on the airport, and sometimes we don't get anything back, but it's at least going through the steps to say, hey, we've done everything we can to try to fill it or try to bring somebody in here. And so that's the goal of the airport, is to grow economically and really see things thrive and flourish at the airport.
Yeah. So I'm glad that the skydiving stuff's behind us now, so we're moving forward. Tough thing about the airports, and most people don't know, is you have to go through FAA for everything and then ADOT as well for a lot of it. So you have your work cut out for you, I'm sure, dealing with all those agencies. And then the next question I had is, I've talked to some other people, and we've had it in the past about lengthening the runway, and I know there's a big wash out there that's going to require some engineering. Has there been any talk of that, any plans yet for moving down that path now that we can get our grants going?
So part of the airport's grant preparation process is we develop a 5-year plan. It's called our ASIP. And so in that 5-year plan, we do see several projects tied to the runway extension. That project in particular is going to be a very large, very expensive and complicated project, primarily because of that wash out there. There's going to be a lot of environmental assessments that are going to need to be completed. Could take who knows how long, could take years before those come back and approved. But what we have currently on our 5-year plan is as if we were to extend the runway, or the classification of the airport would change to a higher classification. So we would actually have to offset the parallel taxiway by about 150 feet. And so we would start by going ahead and moving that taxiway now, and then preparing for the actual extension to come down the road. And so we do have several projects lined up for that project in particular.
All right, thanks.
Questions? Bob?
Yeah. Dave, does this affect or regulate people in the business park as well, or just on the airport?
No, it does not. It doesn't. So the business park is a completely separate entity. So this is just for on-airport commercial activities.
Okay. If a business is doing some type of airport business and they have through the fence access from their property to the airport, does it then include them, or how? I don't know where the lines are drawn out there.
So it could. It really depends on the proposal we receive. Once we get a proposal and it spells out what sort of activities they're looking to do, if there's significant activity on the airport, then we could build the commercial operating permit into their through the fence access agreement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? No? Okay. No, I just appreciate the work too. I mean, it looks like you've been working on this for a long time. My question is, you're considering it a guide. So you talk about, regulating. So is there flexibility in this? So if there's something that came up that wasn't in this guide, how are you going to, work with them, to take care of whatever the questions or programs that are going on?
The answer is yes. So there is flexibility.
Okay.
And this doesn't spell out every single type of activity we may come across. These are just the general ones we thought should be in here.
Okay.
And so with the ability to modify these administratively, hopefully, with your approval, and if we can do that, if we were approached by an entity that's not listed here, we would simply develop that minimum standard at that time.
Okay.
And then update the document.
Okay.
And then
kind
we'll
of
go through the
update
same.
as you go along and,
Yes.
okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, that's it. No other questions?
Nope.
So I think at this point, we're going to be going into executive session. Is that right, Larry?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff would ask that the mayor and council convene into an executive session. And I think given the fact that we have individuals here, we can move upstairs to the conference room
Okay.
for the purposes of having the dialogue related to our judge position.
Okay. So with that, if anyone, you want to stay, we're going to be coming back or reconvene at 7 o'clock for the regular council meeting. And we'll come back and close the executive session, correct?
Yeah, I move to
Oh,
go
have
to
to make-
executive session.
There we go.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there you go.